In the dead of night, July 1974, a pulse of raw power erupted in the void of space. A cannon, forged in secrecy, roared to life aboard a Soviet space station, firing the first and only shots ever unleashed beyond Earth's atmosphere. This wasn't a test for science or exploration. This was war's shadow, stretching into the stars. For 20 years, the world remained blind to this chilling truth. A weaponized fortress orbited above, cloaked in lies, armed and ready to strike. The story of this terrifying orbital weapon, hidden from humanity, is a tale of paranoia, betrayal, and a race to dominate the ultimate high ground. Buckle up. This is a journey into the dark heart of the Cold War's most shocking secret. Picture the 1960s, a world teetering on the edge of annihilation. The United States and the Soviet Union, locked in a death grip, weren't just battling on Earth. The cosmos became their new battlefield. Space, once a dream of exploration, morphed into a chessboard for espionage and destruction. The Americans kicked it off with a clandestine program so secretive, even those inside the government barely whispered its name. Codenamed the Manned Orbiting Laboratory, or MOL, it was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Publicly, it was sold as a scientific platform, a noble quest to study space. But behind closed doors, it was a spy station, a military outpost designed to peer into Soviet secrets and, if needed, wage war among the stars. The MOL was a beast of ambition. Imagine a sleek, cylindrical fortress orbiting Earth, packed with cutting-edge cameras capable of snapping photos so sharp they could read a license plate from hundreds of miles above. But it wasn't just about pictures. Declassified documents, unearthed decades later, reveal a sinister edge. The program explored ways to obliterate Soviet satellites, firing projectiles to smash them or nudging them out of orbit to crash in fiery ruin. One jaw-dropping proposal even suggested capturing Russian spacecraft, wrapping them in the heat shield material, and dragging them back to US soil for dissection. This wasn't science fiction. This was the blueprint for a cosmic heist. The Americans poured their best minds into the MOL. The Air Force, NASA, and the shadowy National Reconnaissance Office joined forces, operating under a veil of silence so thick that even the astronauts chosen for the mission didn't know its true purpose until after they signed on. A modified Gemini spacecraft, dubbed Gemini B, was their ticket to the stars. It had a special hatch, a portal through the heat shield, allowing astronauts to slip into the orbiting lab. For 30 days, they'd live in a shirt-sleeve environment, no bulky spacesuits, just a high-tech bunker floating in the void. Their mission? Spy on the Soviets, disrupt their space assets, and prove humans could dominate the ultimate battlefield. But the MOL had a fatal flaw: money. By 1969, the program was bleeding cash, with costs soaring past $1.5 billion, equivalent to over $12 billion today. The Vietnam War and NASA's moon landing obsession sucked up funding, leaving the MOL gasping for air. Meanwhile, uncrewed satellites were proving they could do the same reconnaissance job cheaper and without risking lives. The death blow came when the government realized robots could outspy humans in orbit. In June 1969, the MOL was scrapped, 3 years shy of its first planned flight. Its 14 astronauts, trained for a mission that never came, scattered. 7 joined NASA's Space Shuttle program, eventually soaring into space, but the dream of a US military space station died quietly. Or so it seemed. Across the Iron Curtain, the Soviets were watching. They knew the Americans were up to something big, even if the details were murky. The MOL's existence, leaked through whispers and intelligence, lit a fire under the Kremlin. Fear gripped their leaders, fear of US spacecraft snooping on their satellites, or worse, attacking them. The Soviets weren't about to let the Americans claim space unchallenged. In 1964, they launched their own secret program, one that would make the MOL look tame by comparison. They called it Almaz, Russian for diamond, a name that belied its deadly purpose. This wasn't just a space station, it was a fortress, a predator in orbit, armed with a weapon so audacious it would rewrite the rules of warfare. Almaz was born from paranoia and genius. A brilliant engineer at the OKB-52 Design Bureau championed the idea, convincing Soviet leaders that a military space station was their ticket to supremacy. The plan was staggering. A 20-ton orbiting outpost, 13.6 feet wide, with 3,200 cubic feet of pressurized space. 3 cosmonauts would live aboard for 30 to 60 days, conducting reconnaissance with state-of-the-art cameras and radar. But Almaz wasn't just about spying. It was designed to fight. Unlike the MOL, which toyed with theoretical weapons, Almaz would carry a real one, a cannon mounted on its belly, ready to blast enemies out of the sky. The cannon was the stuff of nightmares. Developed by the KB Tokmash Design Bureau, it was a modified version of the Richter R-23, a 23mm autocannon originally built for the Tupolev Tu-22 bomber. On Earth, this beast could fire up to 2,600 rounds per minute, shredding targets with 168-gram shells. For space, the engineers tweaked it, possibly reducing the caliber to 14.5 millimeters, though details remain shrouded in secrecy. Some reports claim it could fire 950 to 5,000 shots per minute, hurling projectiles at 690 to 850 meters per second. Its range, allegedly up to 2 miles, though in the vacuum of space, those shells could travel far longer. A silent menace streaking through the void. Aiming this monster was no small feat. The cannon was fixed, bolted to the station's frame. To target an enemy satellite, the entire 20-ton station had to pivot, its thrusters firing to align the barrel. Imagine the stakes. A single miscalculation could send the station spinning out of control, or worse, the recoil could tear it apart. The Soviets knew the risks, but pressed on, driven by the specter of American dominance. Almaz was their answer, their defiance, their weapon to claim the stars. Building Almaz was a Herculean task. The station had 3 core components: the Orbital Piloted Station, or OPS, the main habitat, the Functional Cargo Block, or FGB, for resupply, and the VA spacecraft, a reusable capsule to ferry cosmonauts to and from orbit. The plan was to launch the OPS and VA together, atop a Proton rocket, with the crew entering the station through a hatch in the VA's heat shield, just like the MOL. After their mission, they'd return to Earth in the VA, while a TKS resupply craft would bring fresh crews and supplies. It was a bold vision, but reality had other plans. The Soviets hit roadblocks. The VA spacecraft and Proton rocket took longer to perfect than expected. The TKS resupply craft lagged behind, mired in technical woes. By the early 1970s, the Americans were closing in on their Skylab station, a civilian project that threatened to steal the Soviets' thunder. Panicked, the Kremlin shifted gears. They cobbled together a civilian station, Salyut 1, using Soyuz parts and Almaz scraps, and launched it in 1971, beating Skylab by 2 years. It was a propaganda win, but Almaz remained the real prize, hidden in plain sight. To keep Almaz secret, the Soviets folded it into the Salyut program, disguising their military stations as civilian outposts. Between 1973 and 1976, 3 Almaz stations, Salyut 2, 3, and 5, reached orbit. Salyut 2 was a dud, failing days after launch, depressurized, and useless. But Salyut 3 and 5 were different. They worked. Cosmonauts lived aboard, conducting reconnaissance and testing systems. The public saw them as peaceful science labs, but the truth was far darker. These were armed fortresses, and one of them would make history, in a way no one saw coming. Salyut 3, launched in June 1974, was the pinnacle of Almaz's ambition. A crew of 2 cosmonauts spent 15 days aboard, snapping photos and scanning the Earth with radar. But the station's true power lay in its cannon, the R-23M Kartek, a weapon unlike anything humanity had ever sent to space. The Soviets were cautious. Firing a cannon in orbit was uncharted territory. Would the recoil destabilize the station? Would the noise deafen the crew? To play it safe, they waited until the cosmonauts left in July 1974, leaving Salyut 3 empty, orbiting silently. On January 24, 1975, the moment arrived. Salyut 3 was set to deorbit, its mission complete. But before it burned up in the atmosphere, the Soviets seized their chance. From the ground, they remotely triggered the cannon. Thrusters fired to steady the station as the R-23M roared, spitting 20 rounds into the void. Some reports claim it fired 1 to 3 bursts, totaling 19 shells. The results? Classified, locked away in Russian archives. But the test was a success, a chilling proof of concept. For the first time, a weapon had fired in space, a shot heard only in the silence of orbit. The world remained oblivious. The Soviets buried the truth, and Almaz continued under its Salyut disguise. Salyut 5, launched in 1976, carried the same cannon, though it never fired. By 1978, the program was faltering. The Soviet military, like the Americans before them, realized uncrewed satellites were cheaper and just as effective for reconnaissance. The cost of maintaining Almaz outweighed its benefits. In 1979, the program was cancelled, its final station, OPS-4, grounded before launch. This 4th station was meant to be a game-changer, armed not with a cannon, but with 2 interceptor missiles, a Shit-2 system designed for space-to-space combat. But it never flew, its secrets sealed in blueprints. The Almaz program faded, but its legacy lingered. The hulls of 2 unlaunched stations, Almaz 205 and 206, were sold to a private company, Excalibur Almaz, which dreamed of reviving them as crewed spacecraft. By 2016, those plans collapsed and the stations vanished, their fate unknown. The technology, though, lived on. The Salyut design influenced Mir, the Soviet space station that dazzled the world in the 1980s. Even the International Space Station's Zvezda module, launched in 2000, traces its roots to Almaz's OPS core. A military weapons DNA beats in the heart of humanity's greatest symbol of cooperation. For 20 years, the truth about Almaz stayed buried. Only after the Soviet Union's collapse in 1991 did Russia begin to peel back the curtain. Declassified documents and grainy footage from a Russian TV show in the 2010s revealed the R-23M cannon, a relic of a bygone era. The world gasped. A space station had fired a gun in orbit and no one had known. The secrecy was staggering, the implications terrifying. What else had been hidden? What other weapons might still lurk above? The story of Almaz and the MOL isn't just about technology, it's about fear. Fear drove the Americans to dream of capturing Soviet spacecraft. Fear pushed the Soviets to arm a station with a cannon. Both sides, haunted by the specter of defeat, raced to weaponize the stars. Consequences be damned. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967, signed by both nations, banned weapons of mass destruction in orbit, but conventional arms like Almaz's cannon slipped through the cracks. The treaty was a handshake, not a shield, and the Cold War's paranoia proved stronger than promises. Today, the echoes of Almaz resonate. Space is no longer a frontier for just superpowers. China, India, and private companies like SpaceX are staking claims. Anti-satellite weapons, once a Cold War fantasy, are real. In 2007, China destroyed one of its own satellites with a missile. In 2019, India followed suit. The US has tested its own anti-satellite systems, and Russia's arsenal remains a mystery. Space is militarizing again, and the lessons of Almaz loom large. A single weapon in orbit could spark chaos, filling space with debris that could cripple satellites and endanger astronauts. Imagine the scene: a cosmonaut aboard Salyut 3, staring out at the Earth, knowing a cannon sits below, ready to fire. The weight of that secret, the power to destroy, must have been crushing. For the MOL astronauts, grounded before they could fly, the dream of space turned to ash. These men, bound by oaths of silence, carried the burden of truths they couldn't share. Their stories, declassified decades later, are a testament to the human cost of secrecy, the toll of living in the shadow of war. The R-23M's 20 shots in 1975 were a warning, a whisper from the past. Space isn't just a place for dreams, it's a battlefield. Always has been. The Almaz program, with its hidden cannon, proved that humanity's reach for the stars carries a darker impulse. We explore, yes, but we also arm, we spy, we conquer. As we stand on the cusp of a new space race, with nations and corporations vying for dominance, the question isn't whether we'll weaponize space again. It's when. The terrifying truth is this: for 20 years, a weapon orbited above us, and we never knew. Its shots, fired in secret, were a test not just of technology, but of humanity's restraint. We passed that test, barely, but as space grows crowded, as tensions rise, the next test may not end so quietly. The stars are calling, but they're also watching. And somewhere, in the silence of orbit, the ghost of Almaz lingers, a reminder that even in the heavens, we bring our wars. This is the story they didn't want you to know. The story of a weapon that could have changed everything. It's a story of ambition, of fear, of secrets so deep they took decades to surface, and it's a story that's not over. The next chapter is coming, and it's up to us to decide what kind of future we write among the stars. Will we choose peace, or will we fire the next shot? The answer lies above, waiting in the dark.